think the ads are over. I hope the ads are over. One of my timers still says 30 seconds of ads, so I don't know what's going on. Well, yeah, here we are. It is Thursday. Someday I might write an opening monologue, but I really have no desire to. Just like I don't have an introduction. It's like, okay, hi, I'm Kentron Valkyrie, the wolf storyteller. I tell fairy tales and historical fiction, I guess. Yeah, I guess historical fiction. I do try to stick with fiction. I do try to keep it public domain, but, eventually I will write all this crap down. I guess I could be writing it down right now, but what's the fun in that? But anyway, it is Thursday. I hope everyone has had a wonderful week so far, with hopefully decent weather. It's been kind of nice here. I actually went out and mowed the front yard yesterday and mowed the backyard today and planted some flower seeds and whatnot. Maybe something will grow, who knows? Because I am not a wolf with a green thumb. Oh, but anyway, we're here. And it is Thursday. Which means we will be doing more Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. Which I can say we are still less than halfway through the book. So we'll be doing this one for a little bit longer. Then I may have to come up with something different to read on Thursdays, but I guess I don't have to worry about that for a little while. I am going to remind everyone that Friday Night Fairy Tales is postponed for the time being for a role-playing game that Papa Penguin is hosting. So I'll be over on that channel with a few other streamers. But we are doing Cyberpunk Shards from the Edge. I think that's what the title of the game is. But yeah. You won't see me. You might see you might see Strider instead. Well, at least Strider is the one who technically is Florian Sharp. Yeah, I don't really have a secondary name. I'm always just me. Unless you just want to call me Alexander Valkyrie, which, just negates the Kentron part of it. But still, hopefully my internet will hold out. Unlike last Friday when it decided to cut out halfway through. There's a Spite Ops in chat, whatever the heck that is. I have no idea what half the Pokemon are anymore. I have no idea what a Spite Ops is. What did it get a be do? What's be doing me? Hello? I do not like that sound. Usually means someone's trying to disconnect on me, and I don't need any more disconnects, honestly. Okay, nothing there. I really hate that sound. Horrible at sharing that I'm on. I did apply for the creative clubs for VTuber. Not that I really expect to see anything of it, but, it never hurts to try. Why is it so quiet in here? Do I not have music? Oh, no, I turned off the music. Oopsie. There we go. Well, I cut the spot up, so whatever it is. Kind of wondering why my background was so quiet. But anyway, mysteries tonight. I hope you all enjoy them, so please sit back, relax, and I will go over to the study and see what's going on. I hear the fireplace. I'm going to check that real quick. Okay. Hopefully no ad. Well, it says no ads on it, so I'm gonna go with that. Anyway, please feel free to settle in, chill out, calm down. Yeah, I really don't know what I'm doing half the time. Well, I'm kidding, most of the time. But we're here, and we are going to read stories. Why do I keep getting bedoops? Who's bedooping me? I need to fix my chair. Let's sit in my chair properly. So I'll be here. Thank you. Okay. It's 9:09, so let me go ahead and get the book open. And as you may or may not remember last week, we were doing Tales from the Diamond Fields. Well, we're going to continue that. Did we do just one story? Yes, we just did one story for it, so... As I said, hold on, let me get my hydration ready here, just in case anyone pops in and demands me to hydrate. Oh, damn, I can't open the bottle. Give me a second. Hey, Riley. Okay. The bottle of hydration is open. As far as I don't auto shadow set up for you yet. I spelled it wrong. No, did I? Okay. I put Reiki and it still did it right. No, that's nice of it. Yay. But anyway, this is the second story, so... I.D.B. Being Tales of the Diamond Fields, retold by George Griffith. The Border Gang, a complete story. Man, you're not telling me. It's the dumbest, barefaced robbery. It's dog eating dog, just cannibalism and business. That's what it is. If that's true, though, Sandys, help me, may I never see the glint of a Ganova again if it isn't. There was 3,000 pounds worth on the clips and the poor little Tommy's insides, as you know. The Tex pulled me up near the border. In the dark, Tommy slips out of the cart as usual and makes the clumps of guns on the other side of the drift without being seen. The Tex find nothing, of course, and drives on, thinking what sort of a lawsuit we shall have in the time against Lipinski and his people crossing the drift and pulls up by the trees. I whistles, and Tommy, like a good, obedient little tyke what knows his business, jumps in and... Oh, Lord, to think you've got a beautiful lot so far, only to, well, go on, Ike, and let's have the rest of it. Yes, it is actually written like this in the book. As I says, the dog jumps in and I drives off again. About 100 yards further on both, my horses comes to the ground with a crash, and I goes after them on top of my head. When I comes to myself and picks myself up, there was half a dozen fellows on horseback round the cart. One jumps down, and before I can so much as shout, he has a cloth over my head and ties me up so tight I can neither see nor speak. Then he knocks with his knuckles on my head and tells me if I don't want a bullet in it, I'll keep quiet and be good. Of course, I was as they make it. But the dog, man, why didn't he make a bolt for it when he saw there was trouble? He's been veer we had trained. I'd have thought he might have got away in the scrimmage. He didn't have a chance. I hears him give a smothered yelp and squeal, and from that I knows that he's like my head in a bag. That tells me they had tumbled to the lay, or that there were someone there that knew it. Well, the bundles me and the dog got into the cart and drives away somewhere for about a half an hour. They pulls up, hauls me out, and hustles me into a house of some sort and takes the bag off my head. When I looks about me, I was in a bit of a small room, and there were 4 fellows there, all with masks on. Kidnappers and midnight robbers, maybe. Murderers as well, groaned the Scotchman. Ike, mon, I'm thinking ye had a narrow escape. That V state's a domned sight too free, if you ask coming to me. It's nothin' better than our savage land without law and order in it. What did they do tell ye, then? They asked me how many clips I got, and where they were, and of course I says I got none. And they can search me if they've likes, and they does, a bit worse than the text did, I can tell you. Of course, they finds nothing, and then they laughs and says if I ain't got them, the dog has. So they pull toward Tommy out of the sack, and swelt me, old pal, I doesn't like to tell you what happened. I'd educated the dog perfect, and I loved the little fellow, and besides, he was worth a lot of money with all he knew. Sandy Fraser's little Hebrew accomplice quite broke down here for a moment or two, and Sandy himself gave a sympathetic sniff, for they had both lost not only a lot of money, but also a guiltless accomplice whom it would be very hard to replace. They murdered him, Sandy, right before my eyes in a big tin footbath, and of course they found the clips. Then they offered to sell them back to me for $2,000 and told me they'd make $500 more if they hadn't had to kill the dog. Hey, Matsu. Yes, sakes, what a murderous price! Blank robbery! Why, they cost us $300 straight from the coffers, and ye paid? Well, they was worth $3,000 trade price, and the thieves knew it, so I did. I gave them the draft on the bank here, and they kept me in there till one of them got the cash and brought it back, and then they ties my head up again and puts me in the cart and drives me away to the clips in my pocket. Then they took the bag off. It was night, and I was a little of a kloof. They showed me the right to Freetown and rode off. I got into Freetown by morning and found Sandham there wondering if I was dead or gone to the breakwater for a change of air. Welcome in, guilty. Well, I told him the story and got $3,300 out of him for the clips and the strength of it. Then I drives back, breaking my heart about poor little Tommy, and wondering where she'll get another dog like that. That Chinaman's dog that he fooled Louisa so sweetly wasn't in it with poor Tommy. Nay, he wasn't none. Why, Tommy must have run close to 20,000 worth for us, and might have run 20,000 more without suspicion, with that wonderful stomach ache. But here's the dead and gone, and we poor little martyr, and we'll just go and have a drink to his future in the happy hunting grounds. But tell me, Ike, lad, did you have nothing what there were among the thieving murderers might have been? Some of them must have known that they'd never seen us suspecting the dog. They was always masked when I saw any of them, but Sandy, if I wasn't sure of the death of Lipinski and his chaps did for Seth Salter that night, he ran a big parcel when they got it back. I could swear that the boss of 'em had just his Yankee twang, and his built was unlike neither, replied Ike, whose English was of the Oriental order, and whose tenses changed with the variations of his mental temperature. Now, where was he going to? Let's go to the Queen's, that's Lipinski's place. Let's see if he's there, and if he's heard anything about this new gang over the line. When they entered the bar-room, they found Mr. Inspector Lipinski, the famous detective, not only there, but the central figure of what somewhat motley crowd that was wont to foregather since their evening lime juice, to use the conveniently generic term. He was standing, as usual, the most natively dressed man in the place, and one elbow resting on the bar counter, and the half-glass full of whiskey and soda beside him. Opposite to him stood no less a personage than Mr. Michael Mosenson. The events herein be described happened some 2 months after Josie Moe's vicarious conviction, and there seemed to be a discussion over the little heat going on between them. Just as they went in, he slapped his glass down on the mahogany and said in a loud, angry voice, "Ugh. Of course you fellows never take my responsibility, unless it's the case of searching private houses or annoying innocent people. But what I say is that this is just as much your affair as a free state police's. Why, don't you combine instead of everlastingly bickering and letting criminals slip through your fingers? If there's been a robbery on this side of the line tonight, there's been one on your side tomorrow, or the night after. As for saying that the parcel was illicit, that's all rot, and neither here nor there. Max Sondheim is a perfectly respectable man. Why, I've done business with him myself scores of times." "I've no doubt you have, Mr. Morrison. I wish I'd been there at the time," replied the inspector with a snap of malice in his tone which sent a chuckling laugh around the crowd and brought out a red spot between Mickey's eyebrows. Before he had his retort ready, Ike pushed his way through the half-circle about them and said with ill-advised anxiety, "What was that? What has happened to Max Sondheim, and when did it happen? Was he robbed?" Thank you for the hydrate. "Ah, you blighted idiots," murmured the partner, but he didn't about it on the stage aside, so it wasn't heard. He went to the far end of the counter and ordered a drink, hoping that no one had seen him come in with Ike. The inspector pulled himself up straight and, as he could do on occasions, suddenly assumed an air of authority which kept even the angry Mikey quiet while he answered. "Ah, Mr. Cohen, good evening. So, you've got it back all safe, but you're a bit anxious about your friend Sondheim? Very natural, of course. Well, I'm sure you'll be sorry to hear that a few hours after you left him, say about 10 o'clock last night, he was held up on the road between Freetown and Beauchauf by 4 armed and masked men, and robbed of a parcel of stones which he valued at £4,000. I dare say you'll know about here now is the truth. But he rode off to Beauchauf and reported, and we have just had the news here by telegraph. By the way, how's that dog of yours?" The crowd noticed unanimously that this was the first time since the story of the diamond dog had become common property of the camp that the inspector had mentioned one of the species publicly, and they closed up a little, thinking there was something coming. Mr. Mosenson, for reasons of his own, paid his apparently exclusive attention to his drink, while Sandy Fraser cursed all Jews and dogs in silence and kept his ears anxiously open. Now, Ike Cohen, though not a strong man, nor yet of the conspicuous pluck, was one of those particularly constituted individuals who gain a sort of secondary courage through stress of circumstances, somewhat as runners get their second wind. From what the inspector had said, he saw that he knew a good deal more about his late adventure, on the other side, than he thought he did. Suspicions are sometimes as good as knowledge. He stuck his hands deep down in his pockets and looked at the inspector squarely in the face and said, "If you want me to spell your pup, Mr. Lipinski, I'll be happy to oblige you. I can't sell you that one, though, because it's dead. But I think I could tell you the name of the man who ordered it to be killed. Anyhow, I guess you'd recognize his voice. I calculate I did." Ike didn't do the Yankee drawl at all badly, and the shot went straight home. For the first and the last time in his life, Inspector Lipinski lost his self-command in public. But his start was only momentary, and the flush that came to his cheeks died out again in an instant. "What do you mean by that, sir?" he asked, in a tone as calm as usual, but with a distinctly threatening ring to it. "Just about what he says, I reckon," drawled Mickey Morrison, who was about as good a mimic as he was a juggler. "If you don't recognize that twang, I do. That was well done, Ikey boy. What'll you take? The next on me." What might have happened after this no one will ever know, for just at that moment one of the inspector's men hurriedly entered and handed him a note. He opened it and glanced at it, folded it up in his hand, and said, "Gentlemen, I'm sorry, but so far as I'm concerned, this entertainment will have to be postponed. Another man wants to see me very urgently about a dog." With this he drank off the remains of his whiskey and soda and turned and walked to the door, followed by his official satellite, not a little pleased at such an opportunity could get out from the situation which was bidding fair to becoming embarrassing. It pleased the fates to draw out the tragedy which thus began with the inhuman butchery of poor little Tommy, one of many a like innocent martyr in the unholy case of I.D.B., into more scenes that could be reproduced here. The present narrative, however, only concerned with the last of them, or perhaps it would be more correct to say the last but one, and that which brought down the curtain. As week after week went by, the outrages committed by the mysterious border gang, as the unknown desperadoes who had suddenly invaded the hitherto comparatively peaceful frontiers of the Free State and Griqualand West very soon became to be called, seemed to increase in number and daring. It was quite a curious situation, such as one of the student of human crime had never had the chance of studying before, and may never have again. It was a sort of three-cornered contest between underhand roguery, open violence, and the forces which worked for law and order. The old struggle between the police and the I.D.B. fraternity went on as before, but with an added terror for the evildoer who, if he eluded the clutches of the law, might the next hour fall into no more merciful grasp of the gang. The honest and lawful trader still hated the I.D.B. as his worst enemy, but the gang robbed both with an impartiality worthy of a more honorable calling. The police naturally had anything but a happy time of it. If they devoted an adequate amount of time and force to hunting the gang, which was never where it was expected or wanted, the occupation of the I.D.B. became comparatively pleasant and easy, while, if they were at their proper work thoroughly, the gang promptly went to the warpath with renewed vigor and extended scope, and ranked in the plunder in both hands from the honest and dishonest alike. It will be readily understood that no state of affairs could possibly be more distasteful to Mr. Inspector Lipinski than this. Not only was his professional credit at stake, but men like Mickey Morrison, Ike Cohen, Sandy Fraser, and Alexander McAdam, whom he absolutely knew either to be or to have been involved in extensive I.D.B. transactions, but who were now getting rich, and therefore men of influence in a town where faculty of making money anyhow was the only one that got a man on, while making sarcastic comparisons between Hounslow Heath 100 years ago and the diamond fields of today, and were asking ugly questions about the efficiency, nay, even the incorruptibility of the police force in general and the detective department in particular. It was this last suspicion that touched the puzzled and harassed inspector most keenly. As a practical man, he had no belief in miraculous escapes or the possibility of people being in two different places at once, and gradually the conviction forced itself upon him that the immunity of the gang from capture and its evasion of trap after trap, that he had laid it with all the skill and cunning at his command, could only be due to the connivance of some of his own men and the Free State Police, which he knew to be anything but immaculate. This conviction led him at last to the resolve to risk not only reputation and position, but life itself in the attempt to personally break up the gang, or at least to penetrate the mystery which shrouded its doings and shielded it from justice. This resolve once made, it did not take a man of his character very long to translate it into action. He caused certain information to leak out through some of the underground channels which were always at his service, to the effect that, in consequence of strong suspicions that the diamond mail to Freiburg was going to be held up by the border gang on a certain night, when it would be carrying an exceptionally valuable consignment of gems, the stones would be run the night before, as though they were an illicit parcel, over the border to Freetown, and thence conveyed in the usual way to Port Elizabeth instead of Cape Town. The diamond mail of the following day was to take no consignment at all, but be accompanied by a double guard. On the appointed night, the inspector had a score of his best and most trusted men, armed to the teeth, posted along the border within hail of the point where the road to Freetown crosses it. On the other side of a detachment of the Free State Police were, by arrangement with the district chief, to be lying in wait, ready to act in concert with them, and to catch the gang between two forces at the moment of attack. When Inspector Lipinski set out that night to take his part of the working in the scheme, he took an even more than usually affectionate leave of his daughter, a pretty, graceful girl of 16 or 17, who was the incarnation of one romance in his life, the daughter of the only woman he had ever looked upon to love and long for, and the one rose that he had saved from the paradise which had once dwelt in. He went to his office and changed his usual attire for a suit of clothes that he had never been seen in, a sort of semi-sporting rig that he had had up specially from Cape Town, and put his favorite Smith Wesson in his right-hand coat pocket, and started out to walk the Beaconsfield. On the way over, his Kaffir groom, leading his best horse, he mounted and saw that the pair of heavy colts and the holsters were ready for the immediate use, and then he cantered off towards the border, which he had timed himself to reach a little before 1 in the morning. It had been arranged that 2 of his own men should hail him just before he got to it, and that then the game was to begin. News had reached him that the gang had got wind of the big parcel he was supposed to be carrying, and had vowed to have him at any price. If his men only did their duty, and the Free State Police kept faith with him, the new terror on the border would be a thing of the past by morning. 2 mounted figures loomed out of the darkness ahead of him, and pulled up on either side of the road. A gruff hail came growling down the wind. "Is that you, Davies? Mays? All right. I suppose the others are ready. Open a bit and let me through. Then chase for all you've worth. You needn't be afraid of catching me." As he said this, he touched his horse with a spur, and to make the easy canter broke into a gallop. The 2 men pulled their animals aside. As he came up, the moon broke through a rift in the clouds, and he saw that they were both masked. It was too late to stop. He ducked his head and dived for his Smith Wesson, but the next instant a rein of plaited rope of rawhide stretched out taut over the road, and passed over his horse's head, and took him under the chin. Then came a jerk that nearly broke his neck, and a thump against the hard mud of the road, a mist of dancing stars before his eyes, and then darkness. When he came to himself, he was half sitting, half lying in a hammock deck chair in the same little huts which Ike Cohy had witnessed the murder of poor little Tommy. There was a burning taste of raw brandy in his mouth and throat, and his head was aching terribly. He looked up and saw a man in a black cloth mask over the upper part of his face, sitting astride a wooden chair in front of him, his arms across his back, looking at him through the eye holes in his mask. Even in the first moments of returning consciousness, he seemed to recognize something familiar about him, and the seeming soon became certainty. "Evening, Inspector. Coming around a bit. That's right. Been waiting a time to have a little bit of a chat with you. Feel up to it now? Have another nip?" There was no mistaking that drawling tone or the clip of the word ends. The inspector's rallying thoughts went back to the night at Freetown, nearly 18 months ago now, for when the sake of a personal pique and threatened reputation, he had sanctioned, in fact assisted in the doing so, of a deed of treachery and violence, the one unlawful, unmanly act in his life, which he chose the worst of offenses laid to the charge of the gang would compare only too favorably. Now he felt instinctively that he was in the presence and at the mercy of the chief of the band of outlaws against which he had declared war to the death, a man who owed him a grudge that life would hardly pay. Still, he had deliberately staked his life on this very venture, and he was not the man to take his stakes off the table when the game was going against him. He looked in silence at the masked man for a few moments to let his thoughts get into something like order. Then he said quietly, "Well, Mrs. Salter, I confess I never expected to see you in the flesh again, but since you've manifestly resurrected, I don't quite see the point of the mask of yours, at least not in private life." "Resurrected? By thunder, Sonny, you've hit it in the once. Say, did you ever see anything more like last year's corpse than me?" He tore the mask from his face, and he uttered the last word. The inspector staggered to his feet and dropped back into the chair with a gasp of amazement, and the groan of horror mingled with the same breath. What had been Seth Salter's not uncomely face was now a one-eyed, noseless mass of pits and seams and scars too hideous to imagine. "Yeah, it looks sort of pretty, don't it? Don't seem to think too much of it. Well, perhaps not. 'Tain't likely. But if you and your chaps didn't exactly do it, them was you're kind enough to leave me in the yonder, and the kloof did. Yes, sir, that's vulture's work. I had a bullet of yours right through my arm and one through my chest to your slouches, and a crack over the head with a carbine stock that'd knocked the gruel out of some people's skulls. So, you see, I hadn't much chance again the critters, but I thought I'd fight to finish, and have done the Cape lad hadn't come through the kloof before I was done, and toted what was left of me to his hut, and fetched an old Kaffir medicine man to patch me up." You needn't trouble to make any remarks. You're weak yet, and I'm on the deck just now. I'll make things shorter and pleasanter if you just make yourself comfortable and hear me out. I shan't worry whether what happened to me just after. I got better, and had one eye and mouth left, and you see, and the eye had to look around for something to put in the mouth. Well, after considerable ups and downs, I met your Lieutenant Mays way down in Noddle. I told him who I was or had been, for you'd bet he didn't recognize me, and we put our heads together and worked out the border gang scheme. I found the requisite hard cases for the actual work, and got round to your chaps and kept 'em off the scent, as the case might be. The game worked like an angelic picnic. We robbed thieves, and the thieves ain't split. And then, as an organization got better, we extended things. By about 3 months ago, we had half your chaps and nearly all the slops on this side in our pay. Well, we've made tons of money, and we're just thinking about retiring into respectable society. But, Mr. Lipinski, there's just 2 things I want to do before I do that. And those are revenge on me, and what else, may I ask? I guess you're a nervy little man, and you may ask. Yes, one of them's to square up things with you, and the other's to clean out the mail when it comes to the big consignment that you tried to fool us over tonight on board, which I take it'll be on the day after tomorrow, or I should say today for its moment now. Well, you've got safe and all the guard but two chipping in with us, so that's as good as done. May I ask again what you intend to do with me in the way of squaring things up with me? Something with vultures in it, I suppose. I can't growl under the circumstances, though for the sake of my own conscience, I'd like to tell you that we honestly thought that you were dead before we left you. I can't think how you stood all we gave you. What a thousand pities you didn't just have the stones and give up quietly. I guess it is for you, but why didn't you let me keep up and after I played the game and run 'em fair and honorable? But that's nowhere. I didn't think you were a white man in the grit all through. I would have given you a chance. I've had living bones, so to speak, picked clean by tomorrow night, and I might nearer than mine. I believe you did think me dead, so I'll give you a square show. But I'm going to give you half an hour's hell first, just to even things up for what I had when I was fighting the vultures. And that? I'm going to make you play with me Chicago, best 7 games out of 13. If I win, I shall plug you fatally and go and clean out the mail. If you win, I'll give you back your shooter and back one eye again, and your 2 shooting on the drop. I'll set the alarm to go off at 2 minutes, and we've taken our places. And then when it goes off, we'll go, one or both of us. That's about as fair as I can afford to be. What do you think? I don't see much hell in that, to tell you the truth. No, because you seem to have forgotten that Miss Radna's gone down with the mail that day. You know, I admired her a lot. How did you think she'd like to have some stones we all got when I had 'em cut for her as a wedding present? I shouldn't take the dead gems and be living in the best of 'em all behind, you bet. That'll do, curse you. Get out the dice. Well, that's business anyhow, if you ain't over grateful or polite. Take a drink first to steady your hand. No? Then I will. Here's the dice. We'll shake for the first throw. Now, for the instruction of the unsophisticated, the game of Chicago is played with dice in this wise. 5 dice are thrown. Aces count 100, the first 6 thrown 60, the others 6. From 5 down to 2 spots are counted. 1 bone must be left on the table for each throw. Hence, there are 5 throws, and the highest possible is 5 aces, counting 500. Kind of sounds like Yahtzee. The 2 played in silence. People usually do when the stakes are big, so that if they lose, they can never play again. Fates may have been looking over their shoulders and enjoying the deadly game, for they drew it out in the utmost length. For the 10th game, Salter was 2 ahead, and the Inspector won the 11th by 6, and the 12th by 7. 6 and 7's 13, and we've a 13th game to play, said Salter, shaping the first actual sentence that had been spoken since the play began. Shouldn't wonder if I lost now. That's right, help yourself. Whiskey's good for shooting. My throw, I reckon. He shook up the dice and canted the box gently over. The dice trickled out in a little white rattling stream. When they settled, there were 2 aces, a 6, a 4, and a 2. 260's not a bad start, but I guess I'll give the aces another chance. He shook up the 3 dice. They came out an ace and 2 sixes. His score was now 360 with 2 more throws, but he had the option of leaving the 6 or including it in the next throw on the chance of getting an ace instead of it. He left it and threw the 2. What came up 6 and 4, making his total 424 with 1 more throw. He tossed the 4 into the box and sent it rolling on the table, and when it stopped, it was a 3. I've seen better, he said as he gathered the dice into the box and pushed it over to the inspector. But anything over 400 takes figures to beat it. Lipinski's first throw was a poor one. 6, 5, 2 threes, and 2. On the second throw, 3 aces came up together, making the score 360. The other was a 4. He picked it up and threw it again and made 3 of it. He tried again and made it a 6. He was now 424 behind. Tough luck, but I guess you've got to try again, pard. The hand of the man was firm through the heart of the father was shaking when the inspector turned the box over the last time. Ace, by thunder, I thought so. Well, if it ain't the luck of hell, tell me, where's your gun? By every law, save for the unwritten code of gambler's honor, Inspector Lipinski would have been justified in covering Salter as he went for the alarm, and he had another very strong motive for doing it. But he didn't. He knew the game, and he played it. They took their places in opposite corners of the hut, about 8 paces apart. The little insomnia clock seemed to think itself a boiler factory by the time being, so loudly that it ticked off the final fatal seconds. Whir, bang, 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 tingling, dingling, bang, bang, ting, bang, zrip. It was a strange chorus his mortal ears ever heard, and the little clock seemed to think so, and it did its best to keep up its end. When it was over, Inspector Lipinski pulled himself up on his hands and, looking across the hut through a mist of blood and fog of smoke, saw Seth Sutler's one eye glaring at him over the barrel of a revolver which was swaying to and fro about a foot or so from the floor. Then he remembered that this Smith Wesson had only 5 chambers. Salter's Colt probably had 6. He saw the flame leap from the muzzle, and at the same instant Salter's head dropped with a thump on the floor. The red-hot knife seemed to pierce his shoulder, and then he dropped too, just too to hear the angry shouts and stamping of horse hooves outside. The Free State Police didn't mind winking for satisfactory considerations at I.D.B. or even at the peaceable form of a robbery under arms, but they had neither the stomach nor the heart for the share of blood guiltiness, and so when one of the inspector's traders dropped the hint at the real purpose for which he had been taken to the hut, the righteous indignant commandant ordered an immediate raid on it. It got there 3 minutes too late. Salter was unconscious and bleeding to death with 5 bullet holes in him. The inspector was insensible too, but he revived and lived long enough to give the true story of what happened. The Dutch policeman wisely concluded that the process of whitewashing would be good for his soul, so he had the inspector's body conveyed with all honor across the border, and delivered it to British authorities, with such an account of the night's doings as fully ensured their being the last of the exploits of the border gang. Yes, said the gentleman who had given me the main points of the foregoing narrative, as we sat under the veranda in the garden of the Central one night after dinner. Yes, Lipinski was a good sort, a very good sort, and so was Salter. I knew them both and liked them both. It's a pity that 2 men should have to started off plugging at each other with lead, just when they had different ideas about the diamond trade. And it all went for nothing, too. There were I.D.Bs then, and there are I.D.Bs now. Only they work differently. Those infernal stones are too tempting, and as long as the diamonds are diamonds, there will be I.D.Bs of some sort. Ouch. Yay! Oh. Okay. There are only 2 of the stories of I.D.B. And I don't think I'd be able to get another story before ads start. It doesn't sound like I have 16 minutes before ads. Check something. Okay. Next one's a stolen Cigar-Case. So it's a different author, different series. And I'm going to go ahead and push the ads just to get them out of the way. So I will see everyone back in a bit. Okay, it looks like we are back. So I hope we are. My stream timing and the ads never seem to line up anymore as much. But yeah. What's this? Silent it. I keep getting alerts from my computer and it's making me worry that it's disconnecting from the internet. So hopefully it will stay on. And I'm really hoping it will. Because last week was kind of a downer with it disconnecting halfway through its story. But anyway. That's funny. This one. Oh, this is interesting. So this one, the title actually says that it's supposed to be by Arthur Conan Doyle, but it's not. It's actually written by someone named Bret Hart. But the title has it as A.C-N-D-LE. But apparently that's someone who likes to imitate the style of well-known writers. Which is just funny in itself. Okay. So our next story for tonight. The Stolen Cigar-Case by Bret Hart. I found Hemlock Jones in the old Brook Street lodgings, musing before the fire. With the freedom of an older friend, I once threw myself at my old familiar attitude at his feet and gently caressed his boot. I felt I was induced to do this for two reasons. One, that it enabled me a good look at his bent, concentrated face, and the other, that it seemed to indicate my reverence for his superhuman insight. So absorbed was he, even then, in tracking some mysterious clue that he did not seem to notice me. But therein I was wrong, as I always was in my attempts to understand that powerful intellect. "It's raining," he said, without lifting his head. "You've been out?" I said quietly. "No, but I see your umbrella is wet, and that your overcoat, which you threw off in the entering, has drops of water on it." I sat aghast at his penetration. After a pause, he said carelessly, as if dismissing the subject, "Besides, I hear the rain on the window. Listen." I listened, but I could scarcely credit my ears. But there was a soft pattering of drops on the pane. It was evident there was no deceiving this man. "Have you been busy lately?" I asked, changing the subject. "With that new problem given up to Scotland Yard as inscrutable, has occupied that gigantic intellect." This is clearly a parody writer, and I love it. He drew back his foot slightly and seemed to hesitate. There he returned it to its original position. Then he answered wearily, "Mere trifles, nothing to speak of. The Prince of Copley has been here to get my advice regarding the disappearance of certain rubies from the Kremlin, and the Raja of Putibad, after vainly hitting his entire bodyguard, has been obliged to seek my assistance to recover his jeweled sword. The Grand Duchess of Pretzel-Brandesburg is desiriously in discovering where her husband was on the night of the 14th of February, and last night," he lowered his voice slightly, "a lodger in this very house, meeting me on the stairs, wanted to know why they don't answer the bell." I could not help smiling until I saw the frown gathering in his inscrutable forehead. "Pray to remember," he said coldly, "that it was through such an apparent trivial question that I found out why Paul Farrell killed his wife and what happened to Jones." I became dumb at once and paused for a moment. Then, suddenly changing back to his usual pitiless, analytical style, he said, "When I say these are trifles, they are in so comparison with an affair that is now before me. A crime has been committed, and, singularly enough, against myself. You start," he said. "You wonder who would be dared to attempt it. So did I. Nevertheless, it has been done. I have been robbed." "You robbed you, Hemlock Jones, the terror of peculators!" I gasped in amazement, rising and gripping the table as I faced him. "Yes, listen. I would confess to it no other. But you have followed my career. You know my methods. Yea, for whom I have partly lifted the veil that conceals my plans from ordinary humanity. You, who have years rapaciously accepted my confidences, passionately admired my inductions and inferences, placed yourself at my beck and call, become my slave, groveled at my feet, given up your practice, except those unnumerative and rapidly decreasing patients to whom, in moments of abstraction over my problems, you have administered strychnine for quinine and arsenic for Epsom salts. You who have sacrificed everything and everybody to me, you I make my confidant." I rose and embraced him warmly, yet he was already so engrossed in thought that at the same moment he mechanically placed his hand upon his watch chain, as if to consult the time. "Sit down," he said. "Have a cigar." "I have given up cigar smoking," I said. "Why?" he asked. I hesitated and perhaps colored. I had really given it up because, with my diminished practice, it was too expensive. I could only afford a pipe. "I prefer the pipe," I said laughingly. "But tell me at this robbery, what have you lost?" He rose and, planting himself before the fire with his hands under his coat tails, looked down upon me reflectively for a moment. "Do you remember the cigar-case presented to me by the Turkish ambassador for discovering the missing favorite of the Grand Vizier, the fifth chorus girl in the Hilarity Theatre? It was that one. It was encrusted with diamonds. I meant the cigar-case." "And the largest one has been supplanted by paste," I said. "Ah," he said with a reflective smile, "you know that. You told me yourself. I remember considering it as a proof of your extraordinary perception, but by Jove, you don't mean to say that you have lost it." He was silent for a moment. "No, it has been stolen, it is true, but I shall still find it, and by myself alone. In your profession, my dear fellow, when a member is severely ill, does he not prescribe himself, but calls in a brother doctor? Therein we differ. I shall make this matter into my own hands." "And where you could find better," I said enthusiastically. "I should say the cigar-case is as good as recovered already." "I shall remind you of that again," he said lightly. "And now, to show you my confidence in your judgment, in spite of my determination to pursue this alone, I am willing to listen to any suggestion from you." He drew the memorandum book from his pocket, and, with a grave smile, took up his pencil. I could scarcely believe my reason. He, the great Hemlock Jones, accepting suggestions from my humble individual as myself. I kissed his hand reverently and began in a joyous tone. "First, I would advise offering a reward. I should give the same imitation and handbills distributed by the pubs and the pastry cooks. I should next visit the determined pawnbrokers. I should give notice to the police station. I should examine the servants. I should thoroughly search the house in my own pockets. I speak relatively," I added with a laugh. "Of course, I mean your own pockets." He made an entry of the details. "Perhaps," I nodded, "you have already done this." "Perhaps," he returned enigmatically. "Now, my dear friend," he continued, putting the notebook in his pocket and rising, "would you excuse me for a few moments? Make yourself perfectly at home until I return. There may be some things," he added with a sweep of his hand towards the heterogeneously filed shelves, "that may interest you, and while away the time. There are pipes and tobacco in the corner and whiskey on the table. And nodding to me with the same inscrutable face, he left the room. I was accustomed to his methods to think much of his unceremonious withdrawal, and made no doubt he was off to investigate some clue which had suddenly occurred to his active intelligence. Left to myself, I cast a cursory glance over his shelves. There were a number of small glass jars containing earthly substances labeled pavement and road sweepings, from the principle of thoroughness in the suburbs of London, with the subdirections for identifying foot tracks. There were several other jars labeled fluff from omnibus and road car seats, coconut fiber and rope strands from material in public places, cigarette lumps and match ends from the floor of the Palace Theatre, row A, 1 to 50. Everywhere were evidences of this wonderful man's system and perspicacity. I was thus engaged when I heard the slight creaking of the door, and I looked up to a man entering. He was a rough-looking man, and with a shabby overcoat, still a more disreputable muffler around his throat, and a cap on his head. Considerably annoyed at this intrusion, I turned upon him rather sharply, and when, with a mumbled, growling apology for his mistaking the room, he shuffled out again and closed the door. I followed him quickly to the landing and saw that he disappeared down the stairs. With my mind full of robbery, the incident made a singular impression on me. I knew my friend's habits and hasty absences from his room in the moments of his deep inspiration. It was only too probable that, with his powerful intellect and magnificent perceptive genius concentrated on one subject, he should be careful of his own belongings, and, no doubt, even forget to take the ordinary precautions of locking up his drawers. I tried one or two, and I found that I was right, although for some reason I was unable to open one to its fullest extent. The handles were sticky, as if someone had opened them with dirty fingers. Knowing Hemlock's fastidious cleanliness, I resolved to inform him of the circumstance, but I forgot it, alas, until I was anticipating my story. His absence was strangely prolonged. I at last seated myself by the fire, and lulled by the warmth and patter of the rain on the window, I fell asleep. I may have dreamt, for during the sleep I had a vague semi-consciousness as my hands being pressed softly in my pockets, no doubt induced by the story of robbery. When I came forward to my senses, I found Hemlock Jones sitting on the other side of the hearth, his deeply concentrated gaze fixed on the fire. "I found you so comfortably asleep that I could not bear to awaken you," he said with a smile. I rubbed my eyes. "And what news?" I asked. "Have you succeeded?" "Better than I expected," he said. "And I think," he added, tapping his notebook, "I owe much to you." Deeply gratified, I waited more, but in vain. I ought to have remembered that in his moods Hemlock Jones was reticence himself. I told him sharply of the strange intrusion, but he only laughed. Later, when I rose to go, he looked at me playfully. "If you were a married man," he said, "I would advise you not to go home until you have brushed your sleeve. There are a few short, brown sealskin hairs on the inner side of your forearm, just where they would look as if they were adhered to the arms, or sealskin sack with some pressure." "For once you are at fault," I said triumphantly. "The hair is my own, you'll perceive. I have just had it cut in the hairdresser's, and no doubt the arm projected beyond the apron." He frowned slightly, yet nevertheless on turning to go, he embraced me warmly. A rare exhibition in that man of ice. He even helped me on with the overcoat and pulled out to smooth down the flaps of my pockets. He was particular, too, and fitting my arm of my overcoat sleeve, shaking the sleeve down to the armhole of the cuff with his deft fingers. "Come again soon," he said, and clapped me on the back. "At any and all times," I said enthusiastically. "I only ask 10 minutes twice a day to eat the crust in my office and 4 hours of sleep at night. The rest of my time is devoted to you always, as you know." "It is indeed," he said, with his impenetrable smile. Nevertheless, I did not find him at home when I called next. One afternoon, when nearing my own home, I met him in one of his favorite disguises, a long blue swallow-tailed coat, striped cotton trousers, a large turnover collar, blackened face, and white hat, carrying a tambourine. Of course, the disguise was perfect, although it was known to myself, and I passed him, accordingly to an old understanding between us, without the slightest recognition, trusting to a later explanation. At another time, I was making a professional visit to the wife of a publican on the East End, and I saw him in disguise of a broken-down artisan looking into the window of an adjacent pawn shop. I was delighted to see that he was evidently following my suggestions, and in my joy I ventured to tip him with a wink. It was absolutely extractedly returned. 2 days later, I received a note appointing a meeting at his lodgings that night. That meeting, alas, was one of the memorable occurrences of my life, and the last meeting I ever had with Hemlock Jones. I will try to set it down calmly, though my pulses still throb with a recollection of it. I found him staring before the fire with that look upon his face which I had seen only once or twice in our acquaintance, a look which I may call an absolute concentration of inductive and deductive ratiocination, which was the human tender or sympathetic, was absolutely discharged. He was simply an icy algebraic symbol. Indeed, his whole being was concentrated to that extent that his clothes fitted loosely, and the head was absolutely so much reduced in size by his mental compression that his hat tipped back from his forehead and literally hung off of his massive ears. After I entered, he locked the doors, fastened the windows, and even placed a chair before the chimney. As I watched those significant precautions with absorbing interest, he suddenly drew a revolver, and presenting it to my temple, said in low, icy tones, "Hand over that cigar-case." Even in my bewilderment, my reply was truthfully spontaneous and involuntary. "I haven't got it," I said. He smiled bitterly and threw down his revolver. I expected that reply. "Then let me now confront you with something more awful, more deadly, and more relentlessly convincing than a mere lethal weapon. The damning inductive and deductive proofs of your guilt." He drew from his pocket a roll of paper and a notebook. "But surely," I gasped, "you are joking. You could not for a moment believe—" "Silence!" he roared. "Sit down." I obeyed. "You have condemned yourself," he said, and went on piteously. "Condemned yourself on the process familiar to you, applauded by you, accepted by you for years. You will go back to the time when you first saw the cigar-case. Your expressions," he said in cold, deliberate tones, consulting his paper, "were, 'How beautiful! I wish it were mine.' This was your last step in crime, and my first indication. From 'I wish it were mine' to 'I will have it mine.' And more detail, 'How can I make it mine?' The advice was obvious. Silence. But as my methods, it was necessary that I should be overwhelmingly induced to the crime. That unholy admiration of yours in the mere trinket itself was not enough. You are a smoker of cigars." "But," I burst out passionately, "I told you I've given up smoking cigars." "Fool," he said calmly. "That is the second time you've committed yourself. Of course you told me. What more natural than you to blazon forth that prepared and unsolicited statement that you prevent accusation? Yet, as I said before, even with that wretched attempt to cover up your tracks was not enough. I still find that overwhelming, impelling motive necessary to affect a man like you. That motive I found in passion, the strongest of all impulses, love, I suppose you would call it," he added bitterly. "That night you called. You had the damning proofs of it on your sleeve." "But," I almost screamed. "Silence!" he thundered. "I know what you would say. You would say that even as you had embraced some young person in a sealskin sack that had to do with the robbery. Let me tell you then that that sealskin sack represented the quality of the character of your fatal entanglement. If you are at all conversant in the light sporting literature, you would know that sealskin sack indicates a love induced by sordid mercenary interests. You bartered your honor on it. That stolen cigar case was a purchaser of a sealskin sack. Without money, without decreasing practice, it was the only way you can ensure a passion being returned by that young person, whom, for your sake, I have not even pursued. Silence! Having thoroughly established your income, having fully established your motive, I now proceed to the commission of the crime itself. Ordinary people would have begun with that, with an attempt to discover the whereabouts of the missing object. These are not my methods." So overpowering was his penetration that, although I knew myself innocent, I licked my lips with avidity to hear the further details of his lucid exposition of my crime. You committed that theft the night I showed you the cigar case, and after I had carelessly thrown it in that drawer. You were sitting in that chair. I had risen to take something from that shelf. In that instant, you secured your booty without rising. Silence! Do you remember that when I helped you on that particular overcoat that night, I was peculiarly about fitting your arm in it. While doing so, I measured your arm with a spring tape measuring from the shoulder to the cuff. A later visit to your tailor confirmed the measurement. It proved to be the exact distance between your chair and that drawer. I sat stunned. The rest are mere corroborative details. You were again tampering with the drawer when I discovered you doing so. Do not start. The stranger that blundered into the room on the muffler on was myself. More, I had placed a little soap on the drawer handles when I purposely left you alone. The soap was on your hand when I shook it in the parting. I softly felt your pockets, and you were asleep for the further developments. I embraced you when you left, that I might feel for the cigar case and any other articles hidden on your body. This confirmed me that I had believed that you had already disposed of it in a manner for the purpose I have shown you. If you still believe you are capable of remorse and confession, I allowed you to see that I was on your track twice, once in the garb of an itinerant Negro minstrel, and the second time in the workman looking for the window of the pawn shop where you pledged your booty. But, I burst out, if you asked the pawnbroker, you would have seen how unjust... Fool, he hissed. That was one of your suggestions to search the pawn shops. Do you suppose I followed any of your suggestions? The suggestion of a thief? On the contrary, they told me what to avoid. And I suppose, I said bitterly, you have not even searched your drawer? No, he said calmly. I was, for the first time, really vexed. I went to the nearest drawer and pulled it out sharply. It stuck as I had before, leaving part of the drawer unopened. By working it, however, I discovered that it was impeded by some obstacle that had slipped to the upper part of the drawer and held it firmly in place. Inserting my hand, I pulled out the impeding object. It was a missing cigar box. I turned it to him with a cry of joy. But I was appalled at his expression. A look of contempt that was now added to his acute, penetrating gaze. I have been mistaken, he said slowly. I had not allowed for your weakness and cowardice. I thought too highly of you, even in your guilt. But I see now why you tampered with that drawer the other night. By some incredible means, possibly another theft, you took the cigar case out of pawn and, like a whipped hound, restored it to me in this feeble, clumsy fashion. You thought to deceive me, Hemlock Jones, but you thought to destroy your infallibility. Go, I give you your liberty. I shall not summon the 3 policemen who wait in the adjoining room, but out of my sight forever. I stood once more dazed and petrified. He took me firmly by the ear and led me to the hall, closing the door behind him. This reopened presently wide enough to permit him to thrust out my hat, overcoat, umbrella, and overshoes, and then closed against me forever. I never saw him again. I was bound to say, however, that thereafter my business increased. I recovered much of my old practice, and a few of my patients recovered also. I became rich. I had a brougham and a house in the West End. But I often wondered, pondering of this wonderful man's penetration and insight, if, in some lapse of consciousness, I had really stolen the cigar case. Oh, that was funny. I stumbled through it so much. A Sherlock Holmes parody. That was great. Hemlock Jones. Oh, man. I wish I could have read that one better. I could not remember the voices I did for Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Got half an hour left. What is this next story? Okay. Next story is a little bit shorter, so I should be able to get it done tonight. So our next story for the night. Oh god, it's got really small fonts. This will be fun to read. Okay. At the Pistol's Point by E.W. Hornup. The church bells were ringing for Eversong, croaking across the snow with short, harsh strokes, as though the frost had eaten into the metal and made it hoarse. Outside, the scene had been a cheery sparkle, all the peaceful glamour of an old-fashioned Christmas card. There was a snow-covered village, with the church spire coated down one side, the chancel windows standing out like oil paintings, the silver sickle of a moon, and the ideal thatched cottage with the warm red light breaking from the open door, and the peace of heaven seemingly pervading and enveloping all. Yet on earth we know that this peace is not, and the door was the ideal cottage would have been closed and shut by a crushed woman whose husband had now refused her pennies for the plate, with a curse which followed her into the snow. And the odor prevailing beneath the thatched roof was one of hot brandy and water, mingled with the fumes of some rank tobacco. Old Fitch was over 60 years of age, and the woman on her way to the church was his third wife. She had borne him no child, nor had Fitch son nor daughter living with who had set a foot inside his house. He was a singular old man, selfish and sly and dissolute, yet not greatly disliked beyond his own door, and withal a miracle of health and energy for his years. He drank to his heart's content, but he never was drunk, nor was a Sunday's bottle ever known to lose him the soft side of Monday's bargain. By trade he was a game dealer, corn factor, moneylender, and mortgagee of half the village. In appearance, a man of medium height with bow legs and immense round shoulders, a hard mouth, shrewd eyes, and wiry hair as white as the snow outside. The bells ceased for a moment. There was no sound in the cottage but the song of the kettle on the hob. Then Fitch reached for a brandy bottle and brewed himself another steaming bumper. As he watched the sugar dissolve, a few notes from the organ reached his ears, and the old man smiled cynically as he sipped and smacked his lips. At his elbow, his tobacco pipe and the weekly newspaper were ranged with the brandy bottle, and he was soon to enjoyment of all three. Over the paper, Fitch had already slept after a particularly hearty midday meal, but he had not so much as glanced at the most entertaining pages, and he found them now more entertaining than usual. There was a scandal in the High Life running to several columns, and subdivided into paragraphs labeled with the most pregnant headlines. The old man's mouth watered as he determined to leave this item to the last. It was not the only one of interest. There were several suicides, an admirable execution, a burglary, and what? Fitch frowned at his new eye came tumbling down the paragraph. Then all at once he gasped out an oath and sat very still. The pipe in his mouth went out. The brandy and water was cooling in his glass. You might have heard them singing the psalms at the church nearby. But the old man heard nothing, saw nothing, and thought of nothing but the brief paragraph before his eyes. Escape from Portland. One convict killed, another wounded, but the third gets away clean. The greatest excitement was caused at Weymouth yesterday morning when the report was being circulated that several convicts had effected their escape from the grounds of the Portland convict establishment. There appears to have been a regularly concerted plan on the part of the prisoners working in one of the outdoor gangs to attempt to regain their liberty, as yesterday morning 3 convicts bolted simultaneously from their party. They were instantly challenged to stop, but as the order was not complied with, the warders fired several shots. One of the runaways fell dead, another was so badly wounded that he was immediately recaptured and is now lying in precarious condition. The third man, named Harry Cattermole, continued his course despite the succession of shots and was soon beyond the range of rifles. He was pursued for some distance, but was ultimately lost in view of the thick fog which prevailed. A hue and cry was raised, and search parties continued to scour the neighborhood long after dark, but up to a late hour his recapture has not been effected. Cattermole will be remembered as the man who was sentenced to death some years ago for the murder of Lord Walborough's gamekeeper near Bury St. Edmund, who afterwards received the benefit of the doubt involved in the production of a wad which did not fit the convict's gun. In spite of the successful efforts then made on his behalf, however, the authorities of Portland described Cattermole as a most daring criminal, and one who is only too likely to prove a danger for the community as long as he remains at large. Fitch stared stupidly at the words for several minutes after he had read them through. It was the last sentence which at length fell into focus with his seeing eye. Henry Cattermole at large. How long had he been at large? It was a Sunday paper, but the Saturday edition. This was among the latest news. But it said yesterday morning, and that meant Friday morning last. So Henry Cattermole had been at large since then, and this was Sunday evening, and that made entirely 3 days altogether. Another question now forced itself upon the old man's mind. How far was it from Portland Prison to this room? Like most rustics of his generation, old Fitch had no spare knowledge of geography. He knew his own countryside and the road to London, but that was all. Portland he knew to be on the other side of London. It might be 10 miles, it might be 200. But this he felt to be shuddering heart and shaking bones, that near or far, deep snow or no snow, Henry Cattermole was either recaptured or else on his way to that cottage at that moment. The feeling sucked the blood from the old man's vessel, even as his lips strained the tumbler he had filled with so light a heart. Then for a little he had spuriously courage. He leant back in his chair and laughed loud, but it sounded strangely like an empty cottage. He looked up at the bell-mouthed gun at the chimney-piece, and that gave him greater confidence, for he kept it loaded. He got up and began to whistle, but stopped in the middle of a bar. "Curse him," he said aloud. "They should have hanged him, and then I should never been held like this. It'll be a good job to take a hanging now, for I've fair to feel afraid. I do as long as Henry Cattermole's alive." Old Fitch opened his door for a moment and saw the thin moon shining on the snow, but no living soul abroad, and for once he was in want of a companion. However, the voices of the choir sounded nearer than ever in the frosty air, and heartened him a little as he shut the door again, turned the heavy key, and shot both bolts well home. He was still stooping over the bottom one when his eyes fell upon a ragged trouser leg and a stout stocking planted close behind him. He was instantly joined by another ragged leg and another stout stocking. Neither made a sound, for there were no shoes to the cat-like feet, and the stockings were remarkable for a most conspicuous stripe. Then old Fitch knew that his enemy had found him out, and would not stir. He was waiting for a knife to plunge into the center of his broad, round back, and when a hand slapped him there instead, he thought for a moment he had been stabbed indeed. When he knew that he was not, he turned around, still stooping, in a pitiable attitude, and a new shock greeted him. Could this be Henry Cattermole? The poacher had been a stout and thick set, and the convict was gaunt and lean. The one had been florid and youthful, the other was yellow as parchment, and the stubble on his cropped head and the fleshless jaw was of leaden gray. That ain't Henry Cattermole," the old man whispered. "No, it ain't. But 'twas once, and means to be again. Led the way in beside the fire. Wish you'd sometimes use that front parlor of yours. I had it to myself this half an hour, and that's cold." Old Fitch led the way without a word, walking innocently up to the fire, and suddenly sprang for his gun. He never reached it, the barrel of a revolver screwed around his ear, and drove him reeling across the floor. Silly old fool, hissed Caterpillar. Did you think I'd come to you unarmed? Sit down in that chair before I blow your brains out. Fitch obeyed. I can't make out, he shuddered, why you fare to come to me at all. Of course you can't, said Caterpillar ironically. If I'd been you, I'd have run anywhere where it's known so well. You would you? Then you'd know I got out, old man. Just been a-reading about it here in the paper. I see. I caught a bit of what you were saying to yourself, just as I was thinking it was safe to come out of that parlor of yours. So, that was you locking me out, was it? Yet you pretend you don't know why I come. You know well enough. You know. The convict had seated himself on the kitchen table and was glaring down at the trembling old man in the chair. He wore a long overcoat, and under it some pitiful rags. The cropped head and the legs swinging in the striped stockings were the only incriminating features, and old Fitch was glancing from one to the other, wondering why neither had saved him from the horrible interview. Catamole read his thoughts, and his eyes gleamed. So you think I've come all the way here to do you? He cried, tapping his shin. I tell you, I've walked and walked till my bare legs was frozen, and then sat down in the hedge and slipped on those and rubbed them to life again. Where do you think I got the rotten old duds? Off a scarecrow in the field, I did. I wasn't going to break into no houses and leave my tracks all in line, but yesterday I got a long lift and a good train, and I wouldn't be here now. And last night I did a crack in a crib for this overcoat and a bit of supper and another of the shooter. That didn't so much matter then. I was within 20 mile of you. And you old devil, do you hear? Fritch nodded with an ashen face. Now, do you know why I've come? Fritch moistened his blue lips. To murder me, whispered like a dying man. That rests with you, said the convict, fondling his weapon. What do you want me to do? Confess. Confess what? Whispered Fitch. That you swore me away to the trial. The old man had been holding his breath. He now expelled it with a deep sigh, and taking out a huge red handkerchief, wiped the moisture from his face. Meanwhile, the convict had desired writing materials on the softener, and placed them on the table with a brandy bottle and a tobacco jar. Turn your chair around for writing. Fitch did so. Now take up your pen and write what I tell you. Don't cock your head to look at me. I hear the psalm singing as well as you do, and they've only got started. Nobody'll hear us for another hour. Pity you didn't go too, isn't it? Now write what I tell you, word for word, or so help me, you're a stiff'un. Fitch dipped his pen in the ink. After all, what was he about to write that would be written under dire intimidation? No one would attach any importance to statements so obtained. He squared his elbows to task. I, Samuel Fitch, began Cattermole, do hereby swear and declare before God Almighty, have you got that down? That I, Samuel Fitch, did bear false witness against my neighbor Henry Cattermole at his trial at Bury Assizes, November 29th, 1887. It is true that I saw both Henry Cattermole and James Savage, his lordship's gamekeeper, in the woods at Walborough on the night of September 9th in the same year. It is true that I was there by appointment with Savage and his wife in her evidence. It is not true that I heard a shot and heard Savage sing out, Henry Cattermole, as I came up before I ever had a word of him. That statement was deliberate fabrication on my part. The real truth is... Hold on. I'm likely going too fast for you. If I'd had in my head that long, how much have you got down? Fabrication on my part, repeated the old man, with a trembling voice, as he waited for more. Good. Now pull yourself together, said Cattermole, suddenly cocking his revolver. The real truth is that I, Samuel Fitch, shot James Savage with my own hand. Fitch threw his pen down. That's a lie, he gasped. I never did, and I won't write it. The cocked revolver covered him. Prefer to die in your chair, eh? Yes. I'll give you 1 minute by your own watch. Still covering his man, the convict held out his hand for the watch, and a momentary contact with a cold, damp one was dropped into his palm. Cattermole placed the watch upon the table where both could see the dial. "Your minute begins now," he said, and all the watch was ticking like an 8-day clock. Fitch rolled his hand from side to side. 15 seconds, said Cattermole. The old man's brow was white and spangled like the snow outside. "Half time," said Cattermole. 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds passed. Then Fitch caught up and, "Go on," he groaned. "I'll write any lie you like. That'll do you no good. No one will believe a word of it." Yet the perspiration was streaming down his face. It splashed up on the paper that proceeded to write, in trembling characters, at Cattermole's dictation. "The real truth is that I, Samuel Fitch, shot James Savage with my own hand. The circumstances that led to my shooting him I will confess and hereby explain. When I had fallen, I heard a shout and someone running up. I got behind a tree, but I saw Harry Cattermole, the poacher, trip clean over the body. His gun went off in the air, and when I tried to get up again, I saw he couldn't because of his twisted ankle. He never saw me. I slipped away and gave my false evidence, and Harry Cattermole was caught escaping in the wood with his hands and his knees, with blood upon his hands and clothes, and an empty gun. I gave evidence against him to stop giving evidence against me, but this is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God." Cattermole paused. Fitch finished writing. Again, the eyes of the two men met, and those of the elder gleamed with a cunning curiosity. How did you know?" he asked, lowering his voice and leaning forward as he spoke. "2 and 2, was the reply. I put 'em together as soon as I ever saw you in the box." "They'll never believe you got like this." "Will not? Wait a bit. You're not done. As proof, I do say, do you hear me? As proof of what I say, the gun in which the wad will fit that saved Henry Cattermole's life will be found." Cattermole waited until the old man had caught him up. "Now," he said, "you finish the sentence yourself." "What?" cried Fitch. "Right where the gun's to be found. You know, I don't. And then sign your name." "But I don't know." "You do. Well, I sold it." "You wouldn't dare. You've got it somewhere. I've seen it in your face. Write down where, and then show me the place, and if you've told me a lie—" The revolver was within a foot of the old man's head, which had fallen forward between his hands. The pen lay blotting the wet paper. Cattermole took the brandy bottle, poured down a stiff dram, and pushed it under the other's nose. "Drink," he said. "Then write the truth and sign your name. Maybe they won't hang an old man like you, but by God, I shan't think twice about shooting you if you don't write the truth." Fitch gulped down the brandy and took the pen once more, and was near the end of his own death warrant, when the convict sprang lightly from the table and stood listening to the center of the room. Fitch saw him too, and listened to. In the church they were singing another hymn, and the old man saw by his watch, still lying on the table, that must be the last hymn, and in a few minutes his wife would be back. But that was not at all. There was another sound, a nearer sound. The sound of someone outside the door. The handle was turned, the door was pushed, but Fitch himself had locked and bolted it. More whispers than a rat-tat. "Who is it?" cried Fitch, trembling in excitement, as he started to his feet. "The police! Let us in, or we break your door!" There was no answer. Cattermole was watching the door. Suddenly it turned, and there was Fitch in the act of dropping his written confession into the fire. The convict seized it before it caught, and with the other hand he hurled the old man back into his chair. "Finish it," he said, below his breath, "or you're a dead man. One or the other of us is going to swing. Now then, under the floor of that room did you hide your gun? Let them hammer. The door is strong, but what room is it? In all your bedrooms? Now sign your name." Deafening crash, and the lock had given. Only one bolt held firm. "Sign!" shrieked Cattermole. A cold ring pressed against the old man's temple. He signed his name and fell forward to the table in a dead faint. Cattermole blotted the confession, folded it up, and strode over to the door, smiling, and flung it open to the prisoners. Ouch. Okay. What's a synesty? Okay. I'm actually having a little bit of trouble reading, but that one had some really small fonts on it. I know I wouldn't be able to get another story done tonight. The next one is a bit longer than this one was. It's kind of like the forced confession. Yeah. A little strange, though. Cat showed up. But let's see who is on that we can raid. Please hang out for the raid. I don't get to have a lot of people in raids very often. Let's see, do I want to raid another reader? Or raid a friend? Or both? I see a friend and a reader that is on. So we will raid her. We're going to raid Harp Griffin. Again, unless something comes up and prevents the game from happening tomorrow, Friday Night Fairy Tales will be on a short hiatus for me role-playing on Papa Penguin's channel. But for now, feel free to copy whichever message applies. You can unlock the one for subscribers because I've got it as one of the easy low-level ones if you really want to use it. But we're going to raid Harp Griffin. If I can type. But hopefully, if I don't see you in my own channel, I'll see you over in Papa Penguin's channel tomorrow. But I hope you all have a good night.
In a quiet town where the shadows play, there's a little bookshop tucked away. During the day he wears a human face, the wolf from the lore in a cozy space. Dusty tomes line the shelves with care. Each story whispers secrets almost like a prayer. With every page turned, a world comes alive. In the heart of this wolf is where dreams thrive. Oh, he howls at the moon, drops the disguise and sighs with delight. Downstairs in his lair, in the warm glowing light, he gathers his friends for tales of the night. With a cup of tea and a heart full of glee, he weaves the enchantment, sets their spirits free from princes and dragons to wishes